So Shari Storm is our speaker today, and she has been a member of the Rotary Club of Emerald City since 2006, which when I went on the website, Emerald City is one of the Rotary clubs that's in Seattle, Washington. And apparently they meet in like the Seattle Space Needle. Maybe not recently, but that's what it said on the website. So Shari has spent 16 years as an executive at a credit union, and she is now the CEO of a consulting company called Category 6. Her book, Motherhood is the New MBA, Using Your Parenting Skills to Be a Better Boss, was published by St. Martin's Press. With almost 20,000 copies sold, it has been translated and published in China and was purchased for publication in Brazil. She speaks around the country on a variety of topics. You can also see her TEDx talk on her website, sharistorm.com. Shari grew up in sunny Kennewick and now lives in Edmonds, Washington, with her movie-making husband, 3 teenage daughters, and a dog named Cedar. So with that, I will turn it over to Shari.
Thank you. Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
You can see me? Can you hear me? Excellent. All right. So a little bit more about me before I dive right in. So like Erin said, I have 3. I had been an executive for many years before I had children. I now have 3, Rebecca, Lexi, and Joe. And I found that once I had children, I was actually better at my job. I was a better problem solver. I had more creativity. I had more empathy. I had more perspective, more patience. I found being a working mom to be something that was actually good for my career, which was the opposite of everything I had been told up until that point. And I got sort of caught up in this idea that being a working parent could make you better at your job. So caught up, in fact, that I thought maybe I'll write a book about that. And at this point in my presentation, I usually ask people, have you ever done that? You stumble upon a new passion and you think maybe I'll write a book, but it sounds like Lynn already has done that perhaps. But yeah, so that idea came to me, maybe I'll write a book. And so that idea kicked around in my head for about 2 years until one day I was at work and I had suspected that a coworker had done something. And so I asked her about it. And as she began to answer me, I looked at her and I thought, wait a minute. I know that look. Oh, I know that look. That's the look my 2-year-old gives me when I ask her, Rebecca, did you put your sneakers in the toilet? And she looks at me and says, no, it must have been Daddy. That's the look she's giving me when she's lying to me, right? And so it occurred to me at that moment that human nature is human nature. Whether we're 2 or we're 62, we're pretty much hardwired the same way. And when you are a parent, you deal with human nature up close, unfiltered, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I thought, aha, that's the idea for my book. Raising children can make you a better boss. So I pitched the idea and I pitched the idea and I pitched the idea. And finally, a publishing house got back to me and they said, well, we like the idea, but what we're really in the market for this year is an advice book. To which I responded, oh my gosh, guess what? I love giving advice. As a matter of fact, next to my opinion, it is my favorite thing to give other people. And so my book was published by St. Martin's Press. And when the book first came out, it got a lot of publicity. It got a lot of publicity. And the reason it got a lot of publicity is this. In our country, in our culture, the way that we think about, the way that we talk about, the way that we teach business really revolves around 2 metaphors. And those metaphors are battle or sports. And these are problematic. They are metaphors with problems. Now, I'm going to step back and I'm going to say this loud and clear. I'm not saying there's a tremendous amount that we can learn from the military because I believe that in my heart of hearts. And I'm not saying that there isn't a lot of good to come from organized sports because I also believe that. But what I am saying is more nuanced, and it's this. If you view your business, your company, your role as a boss like a battlefield, you run the risk of leaving out some very important components. Things like compassion, nurturing environments, mutually beneficial outcomes, things people want in their jobs. But more importantly to me is if we continue to teach business and talk about and think about business in terms of sports, we don't appreciate women's relationship to and our role in sports. What I mean by that is this. Most women, not all women, most women don't consume sports at the rate of a lot of their male counterparts. Now, whenever I give this presentation in person, there is always one woman in the audience that raises her hand and tells me, I voluntarily pay for 159 channels of ESPN and I watch everything from golf to full contact MMA body boxing religiously. And I love listening to hockey on the radio. Not necessarily a typical female, right? But even more important to that is we're not considered leaders on the national stage when it comes to sports. We have tremendously talented, hardworking athletes, but those female athletes don't garner the same fame nor fortunes than their counterparts, right? So what I am submitting is there is room for a third metaphor, and that metaphor is family. Because if you think about business like family, now you're using a metaphor that's compassionate and nurturing and has women in very visible leadership roles. Okay, that was a very long preamble just to get you to this story, because this is the story I really want to tell. So when my book first came out and I started getting a lot of requests for interviews, I will not lie, I loved being a celebrity, I did. My mom, though, she was totally nonplussed. I would call my mom. I say, Mom, guess what? I am in Time magazine this week and Redbook magazine. And she'd say, uh-huh. And I'd call her up. I say, Mom, guess what? I'm on the cover of the Metro News New York. And I'm going to be on Martha Stewart. And she'd say, uh-huh. Finally, one day my phone rings and it's my mother's voice. And she says, you're in the Costco Connection? And apparently I had arrived. So I'm a professional public speaker. This is what I do for my livelihood. And everything changed drastically for me, as it did for many people last March. And I had to pivot, shift, whatever you want to call it, not only what I spoke about, what I teach, what I talk about, but also how I speak. And I thank you. I'm grateful for you to let me come and practice on you, because speaking on Zoom, presenting on Zoom, much different than in real life, much different than in person. So thank you for that. Now, what my presentation is sort of evolving into as we ease back into the world is this. I start with this. What the heck just happened? What the heck did we just go through in the last 13 months? What I'm going to do in this presentation is I'm going to take a hopefully humorous walk down memory lane for the last 13 months, but then give you 3 pieces of advice to maintain strong bonds with those you care about most as we re-enter the workforce, the social aspect of our lives. So first thing is, so we had these really unique stressors, didn't we? First of all, we had physical disruptions, right? Like suddenly, a lot of us were working from home for the first time. And if you're anything like this poor woman, if you were cast into working from home suddenly, you were probably working at some weird, ergonomically incorrect corner of your house. I have to make sure my head stays right in the middle of the screen, because if I go like this, you all can see into my messy kitchen. If you had children, they were probably going to some type of online or hybrid school, regardless of their school situation was. Last year, our children were underfoot 24/7. Maybe you don't have kids, maybe you have pets, maybe you don't have kids underfoot, you have cats over keyboards. Who would have thought that our pets would suddenly become a professional consideration? I have a dog named Cedar, and I will guarantee you she's going to bark very loudly sometime within the next 17 minutes. Everyone was on edge, and we're still kind of on edge too. We're not out of the woods yet in terms of our stress levels, but we spent the last year on edge. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I found this meme: we're not all in the same boat, but we're on the same storm. And that spoke to me for about a week. And then I realized that it actually was very problematic in our country, because we were all worried. We were all worried about the health of ourselves and others. And we were very worried about our economy and our communities and our politics. But the problem became that we were very divided in terms of who was to blame and what the solution needed to be. And it is very stressful when people you care about or people you admire and respect have diametrically opposing worldviews than you do. And then add on to that we were all on some sort of social media like Facebook, and we saw those opinions up close and personal. And that was very stressful. There were a lot of landmines around gathering and masks and protests and everything like that. And it was stressful for sure. There was a lot of uncertainty. Okay, so I'm going to play this little video, and this is actually probably the last time I will play it, because I think it's starting to get outdated finally. But it's a 3-minute video. It's satire, it's humor, it's not real. And it was produced and published a year ago. But, it highlights how little we actually knew about COVID. But I want you to listen to it and think to yourself, how much has our understanding and our philosophies around COVID, how much have they changed in the past 13 months and how much have they stayed the same? So I'll play this little video for the next 3 minutes.
Yeah, I really don't understand why everybody isn't following the same rules right now. They're very clear. So let's take a minute and let's go over them again. First, you must not leave the house for any reason, unless of course you have a reason, and then you may leave the house. All stores are closed except those that are open. And all stores must close unless, of course, they need to stay open. This virus is deadly, but don't be afraid of it. It can only kill people who are vulnerable and also those who are not vulnerable. We should stay locked down until the virus stops infecting people. And it will only stop infecting people if enough of us get infected that we build immunity. So it is very important that we get infected and also do not get infected. You should not go to the doctor's office or the hospital unless you have to go there. Unless, of course, you are too sick to go there. This virus has no effect on children except for those children in which it affects. The virus remains active on different surfaces for 2 hours or 4 hours or 6 hours, but in most cases it's days and not hours, and it needs a damp environment or a cold environment that is warm and dry in the air. Unless the air is plastic. Schools are closed, so you need to homeschool your children unless you can send them to school because you are not home. If you are at home, you can school your children using various portals and online classrooms unless you have poor internet, more than one child, only one computer, or you are working from home. Baking cakes can be considered math, science, or art. If you are home educating, you can include household chores within their education curriculum. And if you are home educating, you may start drinking at approximately 10 a.m. every day. If you are not home educating children, you may also start drinking at approximately 10 a.m. Masks are useless at protecting you against the virus, but you still need to wear one because it can save lives. And in some cases, it may even be mandatory, but also maybe not. You must not go to work, but you can get another job, at which point you may go to work. Stay home. I don't know how many more celebrities we need to have tell you how important it is to go outside and take care of your mental health. There is no shortage of groceries in the supermarket. There are simply many things missing. You don't need to go buy a bunch of toilet paper, but you should buy some in case you need it. If you are sick, you may go out once you are better, but those in your household, they cannot go out once you are better unless, of course, they need to go out. Animals are not affected by the virus, except for that cat that tested positive in Belgium in February, plus a couple tigers. The number of corona-related deaths will be announced daily, but we don't know how many people are infected because we were only testing those who are almost dead to determine if that's what they will die of. The people who die of corona who are not counted won't or will be counted, but maybe not. To help protect yourself during these times, you should be eating well and exercising, but exercising only eating what you have at home to avoid going to the stores unless you need toilet paper or a fence panel. It's important to get fresh air, but don't go to parks, but do go walk in other places. Just don't sit down unless you are old or pregnant. But if you do sit down, don't sit for too long. Unless you are old and you are pregnant, in which case you need to sit down. But if you do sit down, don't eat unless you've had a long walk, which you are allowed to do if you are old or pregnant, except for times in which you aren't. Don't visit old people, but you have a moral obligation to take care of old people and bring them food and medicine. And finally, no businesses will go down due to coronavirus except those businesses that go down due to COVID-19. I hope this cleared up any questions about what we should and should not be doing during this time. Please educate your friends and family with this information so we can remove any and all confusion surrounding this time. Thank you.
So, I mean,
So
some things have
funny.
changed. Good, I'm glad you liked it. Some things, I mean, hopefully we're not all drinking at 10 a.m. anymore. Although, you know what? Who am I to judge? And I wish she would update it with vaccine confusion. I'm getting my second shot this afternoon, and somebody said to me, "Oh, well, you're going to have to quarantine for 10 days because you'll be contagious." I said, what? What? Like, I think there's still a lot of confusion, and I mean, we still don't know if you can get the COVID off countertops. Anyway, okay, so let's get on to the advice piece.
Yeah.
All right, be mindful of your communication methods. All right, Zoom is here to stay, right? It's gonna be part of our work lives for sure, and our families are still going to use it. What I would submit to you is this: if you have anything sensitive to say to people, don't don't do it over Zoom. Do it over the phone. And it's not your first rodeo. You know this. If you have something sensitive to say, you shouldn't email it or text it, because people can't hear your tone and there's a lot of room for misunderstanding. But I would also say to you, you shouldn't do it over Zoom. Quick story. This summer, I had to have a conversation with our incoming Rotary president, and it was sensitive. And so I sent him an email. I said, Joel, can I talk to you? He goes, yeah, let's get on Zoom. Okay. So we get on Zoom, and I had practiced what I was going to say because I wanted to say it right. So we get on Zoom, and I take a deep breath, and I say my piece. And when I'm done, right? Of course, he'd frozen. So when he unfreezes, he goes, oh, sorry, you froze. Can you say that again? And so I took a deep breath and I said it again. And the meeting ended fine. He handled it like a pro, of course. It was the resolution I wanted. I got the phone. I got the Zoom. I still had this latent low grade anxiety. And so I did a little research. Here's 2 things you might not realize about Zoom. Number 1 is there's always a lag. Most of the time it's imperceptible, but it's always there. It's the reason we can't say the Pledge of Allegiance in unison. Number 2, you can't make eye contact. If you feel like right now I'm looking you in the eye, it's because I've trained myself to stare at a little green dot on the top of my computer. This is me looking you in the eye. You see that? We can't make eye contact. And the fact that you've got a leg and the lack of eye contact makes your amygdala, the instinctual part of your brain, give you little tiny stress signals that say, I'm not sure this person we're dealing with is trustworthy. Second of all, God did not intend for us to be able to see ourselves when we talk to other people. That is sensory overload, to be able to see, like, I'm talking to you, I'm like, why does my hair do this weird thing right there? Zoom fatigue is real, and that's one of the reasons why. So in your day-to-day life, if you have a team that's Zoom heavy, break it up and sometimes just get on the good old-fashioned phone call, particularly if you're going to talk about something that's stress-inducing, even in the slightest. Number 2, understand how the brain works under pressure. Most people, when they endure long-term chronic stress, which is what most of us have in the past year, 3 things happen. Number 1 is we become less smart. We forget things. We're not as smart as we normally are. Number 2 is we lose some of our executive function. We're not at the top of our game. We don't show up as our best self. And number 3, we have diminished emotional intelligence. So we start to lack patience or empathy or perspective when it comes to dealing with our loved ones. So, of course, when dealing with other people, give them space and grace to say stupid things, to forget important events, things like that, right? But more importantly, understand this is happening to you as well, and start building some tactics to help counter it. One of the best pieces of advice somebody ever gave me was, have a phrase you use automatically when you don't want to say anything at all. Because if you're anything like me, somebody says something to me that annoys me or catches me off guard or in any way puts me out of sorts, the first thing out of my mouth is never my best response. Rarely my last response, almost always just my stupidest response, right? And so I took this to heart, and a few years ago, I developed my own go-to phrase that I use when I don't want to say anything at all. It's not a phrase, actually, it's a sound. And the sound is this: huh, huh. Let's all try that together on the count of 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Huh, huh. You see how that feels? Your very best employee comes into your office, sits down in front of your desk and says, I just found out so-and-so makes more money than I do, and if I don't get a raise, I'm quitting. Huh. I value you and I want to approach this properly. Can I have a few hours to gather my thoughts, gather some information, and let's talk about this again in the morning so that we can have a conversation that benefits both of us? You rarely can go wrong if the first words out of your mouth are something along the lines of I value you. So have a good phrase you go to. Mine is a sound. Huh tells my brain to tell my mouth to just stay shut for a moment. Last one, celebrate. I love studying how companies and clubs celebrate, what kind of rituals they build, because what you celebrate, how you celebrate, really defines who you are as a company and who you are as a team, who you are as a club. And in every transition, we need to start building new rituals. And I know we built a lot over the pandemic. It's time to even start building some different ones. I'm going to tell you 2 quick examples of companies that I have seen that have done a really good job of what they celebrate and how they celebrate it. First of all is Highlights Magazine. Have you, you're all familiar with Highlights magazine, right? It's the magazine for kids with the hidden pictures and the comic books and the stories. Anyway, I was speaking at a conference a few years ago in San Diego, and the man who's going to take the stage right after me was the vice president of sales for Highlights magazine, which made me say, huh, never occurred to me that somebody actually worked at Highlights magazine, but of course they do. And he was talking about how it's actually very difficult to sell Highlights magazine. And the reason that it's difficult is there's actually only 2 people in the world who buy Highlights magazine. Now, I'm going to open it up if we quickly can. Anyone want to gander a guess? Who is the target market for Highlights magazine? Any guesses? And I will. Grandparents. Okay, grandparents. Yes, but mostly it's grandma. Mostly it's grandmas. Sometimes there's a grandpa, but mostly it's grandma. So we got grandmas. Good job. Good job. Anyone else?
And
Doctor
Any
office.
Doctor's office, dentist, yes, dentists and grandmas. And under dentists, we'll put doctors and anyone with a waiting room. So he has this award. It's called the SWSWSW Award. It stands for some will buy, some will not, someone's waiting. And if you have OCD, don't think about the acronym too awful hard. You get this award when 100 people in a row have told you no. When you've been turned down 100 consecutive times, there is a rope in the middle of the bullpen where all the salespeople sit with a big old cowbell at the end of it. And you get to ring the heck out of this cowbell, and all your coworkers have confetti guns under their desk, and they take out their confetti guns and they shoot you with confetti, and they whoop and they holler and they celebrate you. And like this man said, he said, any sales program you see will say we reward results, which makes sense, except for I can't reward results. I wouldn't keep anyone. I have to motivate people to be buoyant and persistent and optimistic and be told no 100 times in a row and still pick up the phone and make their next phone call. I reward effort. I reward effort, which made me stop and think, what effort of other people should I be rewarding? Last example, Apple computer. All right, I'm gonna set the stage really quickly. In the olden days, if you had a device break, an Apple device specifically, you could take it to an Apple store, and in the back of the store, they had a counter, which they called the Genius Bar, and they had people whom they called geniuses, and they would fix your device. So I was at the Alderwood Apple store a few years ago because I had a broken laptop, and the genius was working away, and after a while, he paused and he looked at me and he said, oh, we're about to have a tap out. It's going to get loud in here. To which I responded, none of those words you just said to me made any sense. And he said, oh, it's this thing we do on employees last day. I said, okay. And if you can picture, I know it's hard to see, but if you can picture, behind my head is a door that goes to presumably the back office. And right in front of me is the door that spills out to the mall. Can you picture a store set up that way? And out comes a very managerial looking genius from the back room. And he says to everyone in the store, ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you Mackenzie, who's not going to work at the Alderwood Mall Apple store anymore because she's going to Bellevue Community College. And he steps aside and out come all of these geniuses. Apple stores are like clown cars. There's so many geniuses in the back, you don't even know. And they make 2 rows. And then out comes Mackenzie. And she starts walking through this row of her coworkers. And they're hugging her. And they're high-fiving her. And they're taking selfies with her. And the manager has all of us customers clapping because Mackenzie's going to college. God bless America. It takes her about 45 seconds to walk from the back door to the front door. And then she steps out. And that's her last moment of employment with Apple Computer. And I thought, now that's genius. Because your former employees, your former club members can be your best advocates. They can be your best allies. How do people leave your club? Because let's go back to Mackenzie. Mackenzie worked retail at a suburban shopping mall. You know that girl put up with a lot of crap. It was the nature of her job, right? But you could see those memories fading away and being replaced by memories of love from her coworkers. How do people leave your club? Now, had Mackenzie stolen an iPad, I'm sure there is a different door for those employees, which we do not see. Okay. Usually I ask for rituals here, but I see we're running a little short on time. So I'm going to skip that part. And I'm going to read to you. I'm going to read to you from my book. And I like to read a few pages from this chapter called There's No Such Thing as a Family Secret, because it's very 4-way test-ish in its sentiment. Basically, the chapter is how you treat people will always see the light of day. And the chapter, I mean, basically it's don't be a jerk at work. But I've learned that the opposite is true during this pandemic. And I've learned it with Rotary because when the pandemic hit, Our true colors really shone through as Rotarians, didn't they? Our clubs were able to mobilize so quickly and instantly become pillars of strength in our communities when they needed us most. Okay, that's a little preaching to the choir. I'm gonna read now. When I was a few months pregnant with Johanna, who's my third child, I had to pick up 3 of my vendors from the airport. They were going to spend a week with me at my credit union, so we decided to have dinner together on their first night in Seattle. As luck would have it, my childcare fell through at the very last minute. My husband had to work on his movie, so I had to take my 2 young daughters to dinner with me. As 3-year-old Rebecca warmed up to the men, she began to chat. You know what? She asked them one time. Daddy ate mommy's cookies, which she keeps in her car for when she gets hungry. He took her car to ski patrol and he ate all of the cookies. And when he got home, she told him, no, Daddy, don't eat all the cookies. Eat 2 cookies and then stop. And you know what else? One time I threw it up in the car in a bowl and Daddy couldn't go to the football game because I threw it up. But one time, Mommy threw up in her sink. She threw up in our sink because she has a baby in her tummy and it makes her a little sick sometimes. I didn't want my vendors knowing I once barfed in my own sink, but I really didn't want them to know that I keep a stash of cookies in my car for whenever I get hungry. But I really, really didn't want anyone to know that I yelled at my poor husband because he ate the car stash cookies. But if you're a parent of a child who's old enough to speak, you know that everything is always fair game for the telling. So the book came out when Rebecca was 6 years old, and I had a stack of them on the kitchen table, and I was making dinner, and she comes on in, she pulls one off, opens it up to that page, sees her name. So of course she starts reading. Suddenly she slams the book shut. She says, seriously, Mom, you told the whole world I threw up in the car? And I looked at her and I had the dreadful, overwhelming realization. My MBA business book is written at a first grade reading level. And that is my presentation. Thank you so much. Really quickly, these are all the links. If you ever need a public speaker, that's how you can get a hold of me. And this last link right here is a link where you can get a signed copy of my book. It's $15. I can accept cash, check, credit cards, or Bitcoin. Just kidding. I know nothing about Bitcoin, but it's $15 all told, and a signed copy makes an excellent gift, particularly for Mother's Day. That is my presentation. Do you have any questions or comments?
I haven't seen anybody. Thank you so much, Shari, for speaking with us today. I remember watching that video like a year ago and laughing my head off back then. And I mean, it just, I wish she would redo it for the vaccinated. It was hilarious, but.
Kathy has a question.
Okay.
I don't have a question. I have a comment. And Shari, I enjoyed your presentation very, very, very much. You said you haven't done too much of the Zoom, so we're kind of like who you're testing it out on.
Yes.
Okay, well, I loved it. I actually, in a past life, about 3 months ago, used to teach people public speaking. So I would say that yours has been one of the most energetic presentations that we have had ever on our Zoom meetings. So thank you so much.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. Thank you. Yeah, and if I could say one more thing, and this is super dorky, I admit, but I have this fantasy that once the pandemic is over, I can do a Rotary road trip and just go visit the Rotary clubs that invited me to speak on Zoom and meet you in person and break bread with you in real life. That is my hope and dream. I'm manifesting it.
We would love that.
Jim?
You're on mute.
I don't envy you trying to be manic for about 20 minutes with no feedback. I mean, that was a good performance.
Yeah, it's really hard when you're in presentation mode. I don't know, it depends on the software that you're using, but sometimes like when I present, I can only see myself. And it is really hard to like gauge people's reactions and whether they're falling asleep or, you know, whatever. Well, thank you so much again, Shari. Our club does make a donation to the Rotary International End Polio Now campaign in honor of our speakers for their time and talent. And so I appreciate you being with us today, and, you know, feel free to join us at any other future meeting. Erin, what do we have to look forward to next month? or next week?
Yeah, next week we've got a couple of classification talks. So hear from your fellow Madison South Rotarians.
Oh, I love those. Awesome. All right, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and we will see you in a week. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Shari.
Thanks, Shari.
Thanks, Shari.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.